today we come to the end of the Sermon on the Mount. We have this Sunday and next Sunday that we're concluding our summer series, the Summer on the Mount. Next week, by the way, we have a guest speaker, David Roberts, who's going to come in here and he's going to share really different ideas and understandings of atonement theories, which is really, why did Jesus die? What does that mean? How does God forgiveness come through that? If it does, did Jesus have to die in order to forgive sins? How have people understood it through history and other ways of exploring that? So next week is going to be, I think, really important and exciting, especially if you've ever wrestled with those questions. We invite you back for that next week. But today we're going to conclude the Sermon on the Mount. So we're ending in that last part. And I hope, if nothing else, during the summer series, that wherever you are in your journey, that you found the teachings of Jesus at least to speak to you. You found them relevant and hopefully, in some points, challenging. So, like I said, at this time, I'm going to invite all kids. We have a couple adults that are going to help over here. But because our text is about the foolish and the wise builders, they're going to come on up, and I want to invite any kids who's in here to come on up. Right over here, Molly and others are going to be here. There's 2 spots. They're going to build a house. Yes, you guys can jump up there. Go, jump up. Anybody else? Any other kids that want to come up and help build? Just make your way up, and you guys, any kids can make their way back at any point in time too. And parents, if you need to, you can come and get your child up here. So they're going to build houses while the sermon is going. And we got to be careful, especially with that sandy one, not to destroy it, because we're going to dump water on it afterwards. So, and here's a prerequisite, Jody and Chester, especially for that table. So kids, any kids who's building a house, you have to be okay with the water coming in and possibly destroying it. Okay? So I figured, I know that kind of gives away the whole thing, but I figured I better say it up front rather than, oh my gosh, at church I built this house and the pastor destroyed it. So just so you guys know, we're going to cause some water to come over there afterwards and do that. So we have John and Ron in here this morning. So this is our family service. And it's also Back to School Sunday. So I wanted to take a moment to honor teachers. If you're a teacher, would you stand up? Or if you work for the school system, would you stand up here this morning? Remain standing, please. Don't sit down yet. No, you're not allowed to sit down. We have a couple people who are going to go around. They're going to give you guys a little gift certificate. So remain standing. Some of you sat down. Wasn't there somebody else? No, Sarah, stand. I know we have at least that many. And if you have a family member that's a teacher, can you just raise your hand for them, and we'll hand it to them as well? Thank you. There's one up here, Dina. Has somebody, and there's a couple more. We have plenty. So they're $10 gift cards to Starbucks. So we figure that will at least help teachers at the beginning. You might be able, okay, now, once you receive it, you can, yes, like, that will help teachers get through a little bit of the first couple of days. You could probably use that $10 gift card like every day for the next 2 months. But we want to honor you guys. Thank you for the teachers who are underpaid and undervalued and do such tremendous work. It is a calling, it is a vocation, and it is a really, really important one to pour into these little ones. I have 2 boys that are right over here too, so I appreciate it, we appreciate it. We want to be a community that does appreciate teachers and all that you guys do. Thank you so much for that. So let's begin today. Actually, I have a picture that I want to show. Does anybody know the name of this building? Pisa. Okay, kids, pause. I want you guys to look at this picture behind me. Does it look odd?
Leaning Tower of Pisa.
What is wrong with that picture? It's tilted. That's the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Yes, man. It has pizza in it. I don't know if that's true, but it could be. So this was a bell tower built in the 12th to 14th century. And I can't help it when I see this to wonder, like, what were the architects thinking as it was? So the structure itself is sound, except for the foundation, I guess, was built on like soft ground. And so I'm like, I wonder if you're like the architect, as it's going up and it begins to lean, if you're like, what's going through your mind? Like, oops, my bad. And then what do you do after that? Like, for your resume for the next building. Oh yeah, Tower of Pisa. Maybe we'll find someone else. Thank you very much. What is up? The foundation is extremely important, isn't it? So that's what we're going to be learning about today. Let's go to the next slide, which is the text for today. It's a very well-known text. Everyone then who hears these words of mine, this is Jesus, the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7, and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowd were astounded at his teachings, for he taught them as one having authority, not as the scribes. I noticed how that far table with the sand kind of decreased over there, and people moved over to the rocky one. That's good. That's good. We want people to be prepared. If you grew up in the church, like I did, and you were raised and you went to Sunday school as a kid, and you read this text, there's a song that goes along with the text. Anybody familiar with that song? Don't build your house on the sandy land. Don't build it too near the shore. Well, it might be kind of nice, but you'll have to build it twice. Anybody? Any kids know that song? A few? No? No? You know a different one. Awesome. Similar, right? So this is a familiar passage. Growing up, right? Don't build your house on the sand. Build it on the rock. So today, we're going to come back after these guys are finished and talk more specifically what that means. Today, I'm going to take us on a different journey. I'm going to take us, I'm the one distracted over here. I'm like, squirrel. You guys are doing wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to take us on a different journey. One of the things that I think that often happens when we read texts like this house, right? One's on a sand, one's on the rock, is we interpret this oftentimes unconsciously in a way that I think is really unhelpful for us. And what I mean by that is I mean that we tend to focus in on perfectionism. Like my house, my life needs to be perfect and strong and solid. And that if it's not, then something's wrong. And we've been taught, ingrained as kids in this way of thinking, oh my goodness, if my house begins to falter, if my life begins to falter, then surely I built it on sand and something's wrong with me, which causes us then to try to cover things up, to try to hide things from people. The rains come. They wipe out the back porch. Well, let's go back. We're not there yet. Let's go back one slide. They wipe out the back porch. Somebody comes over and begins to notice, like, oh, what's back here? Oh, that's nothing. Let's move on. I don't want to show that part of my life, of who I am, instead of owning up for it. It's kind of ironic, by the way, that we're talking about the rains and the floods. Anybody get trapped out this Thursday in that like crazy rain that was going on? I was at a stoplight, and it started to hail. I was like, I never experienced hail here. And it was like hitting my car. I'm like, what is that? And I look out, and it's bouncing off the road. And I pull up, and we had teacher day, meet the teachers. And it was like pouring down rain, and I walk inside, I rush inside. By the time I got out and to my car, it was like the whole parking lot was flooded. And it was like about this deep, and it was like debris washing down the parking lot. And then I pull out, and I posted this picture online, but I pull out and I stop next to this, it was a stoplight, and I was like, man, I feel like I'm in a lot of water. So I opened my door just to see, and the bottom of my door was like maybe an inch from the water. It was like right there. And I'm like, that's not good. And I drive a Prius, and I'm like, I don't know how the electric and gas works in this. And so I'm like, I hope I can make it. Like, come on, go. We made it home, but we saw trees and all that stuff. So it's kind of ironic that we're talking about rain today, as we've just experienced that. But instead of focusing on perfectionism, we're wanting to change this a little bit. And I'd like to invite us into two truths that I think we all know, but it's good to be reminded of. And that now we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Becca. Number one, rain will come. Number two, rain invites growth. Now we all know the first one, rain will come. And the story, it came upon the wise man and the foolish man. So rain does not necessarily mean that we're doing something wrong. Pain, suffering, hardships in our life are not necessarily because we're doing something wrong, but they come on the wise and on the foolish one. That rain will come. It's not a matter of if, but when. It does come. And I don't think there's a single person here who hasn't already experienced this in their life, right? How many of you here have experienced a hardship, a pain, or a suffering in your life? So we can be upfront about that. One of my favorite speakers, who I quote all the time, authors, religious leaders, is Richard Rohr. And this last week, let's go back one sec. Richard Rohr wrote this phenomenal book called Falling Upward. If you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s, and some of you in your 30s, I think we can still grasp this. This would be, I think, the book that I would recommend to anyone. Falling Upward is about two halves of lives and what it means to move from the first half of life to the second half of life and what that looks like and how few people often move. And it's not about age necessarily, although age propels us to move more towards the second half of life. But it was a book, and I underlined like 3/4 of it. So I was reading through it again, and it was so good. But now we can move on to the next slide. This is a few quotes from Richard Rohr here that I'm going to share this morning. This one, he writes, "It is not that suffering or failure might happen, or that it will only happen to you if you are bad," which is what religious people often think, "or that it will happen to the unfortunate, or to a few in other places, or that you can somehow, by cleverness or righteousness, avoid it." Sometimes we think that, like if I am right, if I do the right thing, I can avoid that pain. It's not always true. So he continues, "No, it will happen, and to you." Yay! Losing, failing, falling, sin, and the suffering that comes from these experiences, all of this is necessary. And it's even a good part of the human journey. So a little twist on today's wise and foolish builders, and the fact that pain and suffering and rain will come, and that it's even necessary and a good part of our journey. Jesus says in the Gospel of John 16, "I have said this to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you face persecutions, but take courage, I have conquered the world." I think Scripture is very clear. We're going to go through pain and suffering. It's going to happen. And here, what is this text saying? Jesus is saying, I hope that my teachings invite you into a place of peace, that you can walk through it, knowing that God has overcome, that somehow God is working in the midst of all of that it brings you a sense of peace, not to avoid the pain, but to go through it in a way that invites you into something deeper. So, the second thing we're doing, kids, you guys are doing awesome. Super quiet, wonderful job over there. The second truth, that rain invites growth. And this is one that often I think we overlook. This is the one that I think is the harder one. We know that pain, suffering, hardships will happen, but that rain invites growth. The epistle of James, chapter 1, and you can read along on the slide up here, it says, "My brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance." So joy, what does that mean? Does that mean we're always supposed to be happy? And how does that look in our own lives? I mean, sometimes we read these and like, oh, I have to be joyful. My wife and I, we went on a trip to Seattle and Vancouver, one of the most beautiful places. Vancouver is gorgeous. We spent more money than we were planning on spending, like you do on your trip, and then we get back, and some things we didn't plan for came up financially, and our Costco membership came up for renewal, and I was like trying to check out, and they're like, oh, you owe this. I'm like, oh, dang it. I guess so, since we go there all the time. And then other things, our oil change, both cars needed the oil change, and then I take my car in, and the guy's like, yeah, you have something else, and it's going to tweak this and this, and it's going to cost about $700. And I was like, when it rains, it pours, it seems like, in our lives, right? Financially, relationships. So here we are, we just spent all this money, too much, we get back, and now we're in this tight spot. Some of it is just our fault for not planning on spending too much, but then all of a sudden our car breaks down. So now I feel like I'm driving like a rocket ship. It's getting louder and louder in my car, which is just me having to put up with it and be like, it gets me from A to B and it's fine. But am I just supposed to be like, praise Jesus, hallelujah, my car sounds like a rocket ship, this is wonderful. I was talking to Matt and Jackie, and I think they'd be all right with me sharing this because they posted it on Facebook, but they had a leak. If not, oops. They had a leak in their house, right? And so the guy came in to repair it, their drywall. They opened up their drywall. It's like, oh, all your pipes, by the way, people changed these years ago. It's no longer legal to have in your house, so we got to get rid of all these pipes and put new ones in. So now a leak, which is unfortunate, that somebody has to come in and fix, turned into like multiple holes in their wall and drywalling and lots of money to replace that all. And we don't expect people to be like, yay, that's awesome, praise Jesus, right? I used to lead the student ministry here. And one of my favorite times ever while I was teaching student ministry as the youth group, junior high, high school, was when we were honest and we were just talking, and the students were like, I just hate this word blessed. You see it all the time. I'm so blessed, hallelujah. And they're like, if I see one more #blessed, I'm just going to throw up in my mouth, right? Because we see, as religious people, we think, oh, we're supposed to be all happy, everything's good, consider it all joy all the time. I don't think that's what it means. And the Message translation, I think, hits it and makes it more clear, but also invites us into something deeper that might not be there if we read another translation. And the next slide, you can read along with me. Same exact text in the Message translation, translated this way. Consider it sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open, and it shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. I don't know about you, but that spoke to me and challenged me, because what the rain does, what the trials do, what the suffering does, what the hardships do in our life is they reveal what's been there all along. They bring our faith to the surface. They expose the weaknesses. They expose areas where we're invited to grow, and I don't like that. I try to get out of that. I squirm amidst that. No one here likes that. We don't like to suffer. If you do, you're odd. We don't like to. But it shows us our true colors, and it reveals to us or invites us into something deeper. One of the things I think we can take away from this is that the path to spiritual growth isn't to avoid pain and suffering, but to allow the pain and suffering to transform you. It's a simple thing. To allow that to transform you, not to try to get out of it prematurely, but to allow it to transform us. By the way, this is why, or part of the reason why I think we need in our communities, especially in our spiritual communities, to honor elders. Our culture honors youth, and I think we should be thankful for youth and celebrate that, but honor elders. With age tends to come wisdom and patience, and they walk hand in hand. Why? Because they've lived through things. They've experienced things that when we're younger, we're just squirming about. And it's nice to have elders who can come alongside of you and just hold space, just to be there and to encourage you. So I hope today that if you're an elder, and I'll say that nicely, however that looks like for you, that we begin in our community to honor those here. There was not too long ago a young person that came to our church and had experienced themselves. Do you have a question? No? What did he say? Jackson. No. How's it going over there, guys? Good? You guys almost done? No? Okay. Awesome. We are. Ooh, is it a race now? Oh, it's on. By the way, this is Chester and Jody. They're our kids' directors. They do a wonderful job. Thank you, guys. A young person came and spoke to me and said, you know what's beautiful is some of us have experienced rejection and our families and our faith communities. And when we come to One Church in a place like this, even just having people that are our parents' age affirms us and says you're okay and loved for who you are. And I want to share that with you guys, especially for those who have been here for a while. And we want to get people involved to help serve in different capacities in our church. But just know this, that being here, showing up, speaks to people who have not felt that acceptance and love. And that means a lot to them. And I express that from me, reflecting that to you guys. And of course, and then I get all teary-eyed and cry, which is pretty common. So suffering, pain. And I've shared both of these stories before, but I just wanted to share a little bit too. Molly and I, this is my wife, by the way, right here. Tomorrow we celebrate 13 years of marriage. Thank you, babe. She stuck with me that long. But some people, when you get married, they say, oh, the honeymoon phase lasts for like a year. Ours lasted for like a month. and literally, within 2 months, we were separated on the brink of divorce, wondering, what did we do? How did we get here? That was one of the most difficult times of our life. Several months, it got one point where I think we were married less than we were married separated. And we're like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know how that's going to happen. How is our marriage going to weather this storm? And looking back, I wouldn't wish that, but it's also formed me. And it's made us the kind of people we are today. And some of you might have weathered that in a marriage and not made it together for one reason or another. And yet that has made you the kind of person that you are today. We look back and we realize it's during our struggles and our pain that we're invited to grow. Another story of pain, and I share this, and I have in the past, but I know there's people here experiencing this, is I went through a faith crisis. I grew up in a church that taught that the Bible is to be read literally, that science was wrong, that gay people were going to hell, and that Christians had the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and everybody else had nothing. They were all lies. And as I began to deconstruct that, go through that faith crisis of sorts, it was a pain, it was a suffering. I walked through that. It took several years for me. I was deep ingrained into that. And it did feel like some people call it the dark night of the soul, right? And what I've learned now, at that time, what it felt like is we often talk about construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction here. And most religious institutions are really good at construction. They do that well. But then when you leave and you start questioning things, then you're either outed or they try to suck you back in and pull you back in. And some people, I think, kind of go back in for a while because it's safe and it feels good. Because deconstruction kind of feels like you're losing your faith. Like, where is God? I don't understand all of these things. And it literally felt like I was going down in this black hole. In the midst of Bible college and all this stuff, like, I'm going to be a pastor, and I don't know. I believe in God, but I don't know what God is. I don't know how to read the Bible, all these things. And thankfully, I found a church and a place in the midst of that said, that's okay, and that's good. And now looking back, I realize that's actually a part of growth. It's a part of faith. And if you're going through that today, if there's nothing else that you can hear from me, just hear that that's good. And it's okay to have those thoughts. It's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to be wrestling with those things. And hopefully we can be a community that from construction, deconstruction, reconstruction can hold space for people wherever they're at. Because once you get to the other side, your faith and life looks a lot different. And then we kind of go back through and grow by doing that over and over and over and over again. Growth requires change. Change requires a death. It always requires a death. We don't like to grow. I mean, I'd like to think I like to grow, but I don't, because it stretches me. And it requires a change, and it requires a death. I think I have one more quote from Richard Rohr. Actually, two more. Here's one. The next one. The human ego prefers anything, just about anything, to failing or changing or dying. We do, don't we? We'd rather, if things are working, There's no way we're going to change unless we encounter a crisis, something that forces us to dive in, and it usually brings us into this dark space that's hard. And then death, which precedes resurrection. And that's, I think, a spiritual archetype that's found all throughout scriptures, is that death always precedes resurrection. But we want resurrection without the death often. But that's just the natural way of things. Jesus says it this way: if anyone wants to be one of my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. It's a way of growth, which is this weird, sometimes seems almost morbid. Take up your cross, this instrument of death, and follow me. If you want to go on the spiritual path, which will be a path of growth, it will also be a path of death. You'll experience death as you experience growth. They go hand in hand. You can't experience one without the other. I love the message. It says, don't run from suffering, embrace it. So it translates that, take up your cross and follow me, to don't run from suffering, but embrace it. Well, it looks like we're wrapping up over here. Are we kind of done? Getting close? So, kids, what we're going to do now is we're going to bring, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring one by one the houses over here. Can we celebrate the kids and their creativity over here? Would you mind? All right. So I'm going to try to move this without breaking it. All right. Molly, you want to go grab one of the waters? All right. So actually, I need to take a picture of this because it's so cool. I want to have a picture of this. This almost looks more like a tree fort to me, which I think is way cooler. And it looks like you guys use some putty on the bottom, too. That's cheating. All right. So kids, you guys, this house was built on a rock. Do you think when the rain comes, is this one going to stay? No? Yeah, you guys can come up here. Thank you. Any kids that want to come up can come up. You guys can, actually, we'll stand up because you won't be able to see it. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to just pour some water. Oh no, the rains are coming. Let's see how well you built this. Should I pour some of it on top, you think? No? No. Hands off, hold on. Of course, it's the kids' director's son. Not pointing him out or anything. Uh-oh, one piece left. Okay, so the rains are coming. And look, it's staying up. Good job. Not too shabby. Should I dump the rest? Shabby. Yeah, they're like, shabby. All right, we'll make a mess. Here we go. Yay! Good job. That one withstood. That's good, because that makes my point. Now what I need you guys to do is all slide over here. Stay up here, though. Just slide off to the side. So it stayed. Well done. Now that's going to prove my object lesson here. All right. So Chester, you want to help me bring the other one? And then I'll need a couple glasses of water. Pitchers over there. I won't need much. All right. Actually, I got one right here. All right. Okay. So, here's the house built on the sand. Do you guys think it's going to withstand the rain? How many of you think it will? Anybody? Liam, you think? All right, my son thinks it could. It has a chance. Way to be positive, man. Way to cheer. All right. You guys ready? Yeah. How many of you guys have been in a rainstorm? All right. How many of you guys were in the rainstorm this last week while it was raining a bunch? Yeah? All right. So here it goes. Let's see what happens.
Oh, sorry, Dad.
Oh, no!
My dad's house is raining.
Uh-oh. There it goes! Oh, no! All right. So before you guys go down, why do you think that happened? Yes?
Because it was made out of, because the bottom was made out of sand, and the bottom was basically the thing that was holding it.
The bottom was the thing that was holding it. So do you guys think that it's important where the house is built?
Nope.
Yes? Nope. The foundation is important. So, how many of you guys think a rocky foundation is better? Anybody here think the sandy foundation is better? Jackson. All right. Very good. You guys can go ahead and have a seat. Thank you very much. We'll cheer for them as they sit down. You guys can have a souvenir. Yes, you're welcome to take part of your house down. I'm glad no children were injured in this, and no one cried afterwards. I got that. I heard of somebody who did actually what we're going to have to do is if, Molly, if you guys can help move these off to the side, we're going to have to move the tables back. So for communion, we'll just kind of set these tables sideways, if you wouldn't mind. But I heard of a pastor who brought kids up to build these sandcastles once, and then have water come in and rush them away. And he didn't prepare the kids, so these kids made these sandcastles and stuff. And then he took water and was like, crushed them, and one of the kids started crying. So I was like, all right, don't do that. Special no. So, back to the text. So the kids showed us that building our life on the sand obviously isn't a good idea. Jesus is saying here, if you build your life on the sand, it's like listening to my words and not putting them into practice, right? Not following what I'm teaching, not following those things. Now, here's something interesting. At the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives this whole teaching, right? This is how I want you to live on earth. Not this is how I want you to escape the earth. This is how I want you to live. The Beatitudes. I want you not to worry. I want you not to act out in anger, but don't hate your brother and sister. Right? Going through the Sermon on the Mount. And at the very end, there's only this, it's like one sentence summary. And we kind of skipped over it in our sermon. Kids, anybody here know or have heard of the Golden Rule? Raise your hand. All right, that's my boy. The Golden Rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. And that's the last slide on there, Becca. And Jesus says, in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you. Oh, I'm so proud now. Way to go, Liam. For this is the law and the prophets. So he summarizes everything. This is it. And then he goes on, and that's when we talked about the narrow gate and the wide gate and the false prophets and the two different roads and the two different ways of building your house. But he summarizes everything by that. So if there's anything else that we get, and kids that you get from today, to build your house upon the rock, if you want to simplify it, it means simply to treat others the way you want to be treated. This is important for kids as you guys go back to school, right? And there's bullying, there's people that are mean and everything else. It's important for all of us to be reminded of. And know this, that this teaching was not new. This was an ancient teaching that was passed around. It's also a teaching you can find in all the major religious traditions. Which, if Jesus is saying here to summarize the law, the Torah, and the prophets, to summarize the Hebrew scriptures, boiling it down to here, treat others the way you want to be treated. What does that mean about other religious traditions that are following that, or people outside that are following and doing the teachings of Jesus? What does that look like? Is there an expanse, maybe, an openness that comes through that? There was a Rabbi, Hillel, who was asked, I think the tradition says he was asked, it sounds like almost like critically, can you stand on one foot and summarize the entire Torah? And so he stood on one foot and said, to summarize the entire Torah would be this, to treat others the way you want to be treated. Everything else is commentary. And so I think we echo that. Unfortunately, we make things too complicated in religious traditions and churches. We make it about the external rules instead of simply the actions of treat others the way you want to be treated. And I hope my kids, which Liam reflected, that if they know nothing else from us, that they learn that at the core. Because that's what's building your house on a rock looks like. Everything else, what you believe about God, about how the universe, that will change and shift and evolve. But at the core essence, treating others the way you want to be treated is what it means to build your house upon the rock. It's beautiful. Jesus summarizes everything. Hey, if you want the whole thing, here it is. Treat others the way you want to be treated. So let's go back. Let's finish this thing. How are we doing at time? Awesome. That worked. We had kids up here. We did everything, and we still have a couple minutes. Great. Fantastic. Way to go, guys. So some advice for building a house that lasts. How do we build a house that lasts? How do we build a life that lasts, which is really the topic of the sermon today. How do we build a house that lasts? Here's one simple takeaway. Do you have something to add? I'll let you add if you want to. You know how to build a house. Rock on. Good job. With Legos. You better. Otherwise, your parents, we'd have a talk. Yeah, Legos. They're like number 2 next to the golden rule. Legos. Give your kids Legos. But advice for building a life that lasts. Don't focus on perfection. Focus on practice. Putting these things into practice. Again, it's easy to walk away, to be in church settings, to focus, or to feel like unconsciously, I have to have all my stuff together. And then we end up hiding whatever it is, instead of allowing those reins to expose our weakness areas. So wherever those weaknesses are, as we own those, as we're authentic, it invites authenticity back. Yeah, I'm growing. I'm a work in progress. This is where I'm struggling. Last week, I think I shared patience and self-control and how I just reacted and yelled for my kids. And hopefully, as we're honest about where we are on the journey, what we're struggling with, what does that do? It invites authenticity back. But if we pretend like it's perfect, what does that invite back? Oh, okay, well then I have to be perfect too. What we're striving to do is create a community where you don't have to pretend, where that's not the point. It's not about perfection, it's about practice. And practice means you'll make mistakes. The next quote is one of my favorites. Richard Rohr, he writes, "We grow spiritually much more by doing it wrong than by doing it right." It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay when you mess up. You learn more by your mistakes than you do by doing it perfectly well. And as you walk through those trials, that pain, that struggle in your life, that's an invitation to grow, is all it is. It's okay to make mistakes. That's when growth happens.